Have you ever wanted to know how to lose fat, maybe to feel a little bit better about yourself, look a bit better for a summer holiday, or slip into a new dress you bought? However, the industry is so confusing with all the shakes they sell, pills and fad diets that are shoved down our throat at every opportunity online. Well, these are going to be my top 7 tips of how we can lose fat and how we can actually do that while still enjoying life. As always, if you enjoyed the video and take anything away from it, please drop a like and a subscribe. Tip number 1. Now, for anyone that's following me knows what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it early to get out of the way. Calorie deficit. Now, this term is thrown around a lot in the industry, but what does it actually mean? And in simple terms, it basically just means we're burning more calories than we're consuming. That is it. And up till this day, that is the only scientifically proved way we can lose fat. So despite the fads you hear, despite the extreme diets people are on, despite all the bold claims people make, this is the only way we can do that. And that's going to be the goal of any approach. So now we actually know what a calorie deficit is. It's important, how do we actually work it out? A lot of people throw around this term, but never actually develop on that and leave people a little bit in the dark of, okay, cool, how do I even get there? So what I'm going to do for you is drop a handy calculator in the link, which all you have to do is click, type in your details, age, height, weight, activity level, and it spits out a number of calories for you. Now, this number of calories factors in how much exercise you do per week. It factors everything else in, like I said, age, height, weight. Once we eat to this calorie intake consistently, then we begin to lose fat. For different people, it's going to vary, and this can be a week, 10 days, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it may be, but our bodies after an amount of time is going to get used to eating that amount of calories, and our fat loss is going to decrease and eventually plateau. And this is where we just decrease it by a small amount again. And this is why it's important to make small increments, so we're not just jumping in huge chunks and then eating basically no calories whatsoever. So once our fat loss plateaus, then we want to look to reduce this typically by about 200 to 300 calories. Right, to give you an example, and this isn't a floating whiteboard, we just haven't been able to put it on the wall yet, so I've got an assistant for the occasion. So to give an example, our maintenance level, come this far touch. Our maintenance level is the amount of calories that our body requires to maintain the same weight, hence the name maintenance. So this is when you consume the same amount of calories as you're burning. So as an example, let's say my caloric maintenance was 2,500 calories. So like we mentioned before, a deficit, we're going to want to be slightly under this. So 300 calories is always quite a good start. So that would start off at 2,200 calories. The reason I've drawn a timeline is to basically show we only want to reduce that amount of calories when our weight loss or our fat loss plateaus. If you just keep dropping calories for the sake of it without actually having a plateau, then you're going to be actually eating a lot less calories than you even need to. And it could be a case of you could be consuming more and still burning fat. So in short, we want to optimize every window of caloric restriction. So if we start off at 2,500 and let's say we ate at that for 2 weeks, and then we began to plateau, and then we dropped down to 2,200, and then let's just use a random figure of 2 weeks is how long it took for our weight loss to plateau. And then, like I said, once that's plateaued, we can then drop it again to 1,900. And like I said, there's going to be 1,000,001 variables for different people, and this is going to vary person to person, and there's no structured time of 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks you're going to lose fat for, and it's completely random, hence why I've just used a random number. So don't use this as a rigid sort of guideline or structure. So after 1900, it could be a case of eating at this amount of calories for 3 weeks before we then plateau. So therefore, we've optimized each caloric restriction then. So number 2, and it's one I always talk about, but it's so important, so I'll continue to talk about it until everyone gets the idea. It's tracking and MyFitnessPal. Now, the only way to lose fat, the only way to gain fat, the only way to stay at maintenance is by knowing how many calories you've actually consumed. And the only way you can possibly do this, unless you have a photographic memory of everything you've eaten throughout a day, is by tracking it. And the best app, or pretty much the only app I've used, but you don't really need anything else, is MyFitnessPal. Now, what I will stress to people is to not use it for all of the other flashy features it has, for working out the amount of calories you should be consuming, protein, the amount of steps. You literally want to ignore absolutely everything on the platform altogether and only use it for seeing how many grams of protein you've had, or carbs and fats, and how many calories you've consumed. Because typically people go on there and they click the most extreme. So if it's lose fat, they click, I want to lose 2 kilograms of fat per week or weight per week, and then you get these huge deficits that people try and hit, and it's not sustainable. So we don't really want to do that. So we can pretty much neglect everything apart from the calories and the protein itself. The reason I always stress tracking is because it's not impossible to know how many calories you've actually consumed until you have it in front of your face. A lot of people I get to track their foods now, and I'm always saying it's always the case, I get a new one every single week, is okay, this is the calories I'd like for you to eat at. And then I'll say, just get used to the app for a few days, a few weeks. Don't worry too much about hitting everything perfectly. Just start getting used to it and getting in the habit of using it. And they'll come back and say, I've actually eaten 1,000 calories over or 1,000 calories under what I meant to. I didn't realize how far I was off. And it really is a bit of an eye opener. So get comfortable using the app. Don't worry too much at the start of getting everything perfect, but get comfortable in using the app and making a habit out of every time you have something to scan it or track it. And this is a surefire way to get bang on track with your goals. So number 3 on the list, and arguably the most important for sanity and for actually achieving the goal, is enjoying your food. Now, this is such a crucial one and one often overlooked. Now, when we sort of look at the flexible dieting approach, which is pretty much if you hit your calories correctly and you hit a high protein intake and that amount of calories is aligned to a good deficit for yourself, then you're going to lose weight, you're going to lose fat, and that is the absolute answer. There's no variables in that whatsoever. So people then say, oh, does it have to be super strict food, super clean food? The answer to that is, in short, is no. And then I always go to the other extreme when people speak to me and they say, oh, can I just eat KFC every day if it hits my calories and my protein, and will I achieve the same goal? The answer is technically yes, but this is a bit of a confusing one, because obviously if you're going to do that, you're going to feel shit. That's going to be the truth of it. But obviously you're going to starve yourself of important micronutrients, vitamins, fibers, and all that good stuff you get from typically healthier food. The important takeaway, ironic, is to remember that not only do we want to be having healthier food and cleaner food because it's packed with all those things, but also not to neglect your favorite food. So yes, if you have a takeaway once a week, that's absolutely fine. Just, as I always say, make sure it's tracked and try and work it into your calories. If you want a chocolate bar every other day when you get back from work because you've had a long day, or a bag of crisps, like, it's fine, that's real life, but just make sure you track it. And anything that can be tracked can be improved. And this is so important for me because when I first started trying to cut or lose weight originally for a summer holiday, I ate nothing but chicken, broccoli and rice, the absolute standard. I hated it. I love food and I just hated that. I developed such an unhealthy relationship. And at the end of the day, like I said, it wasn't sustainable. So I couldn't do that over an extended period of time. And then ultimately I failed. So it's much more important to make mindful choices, of course, but not to completely eradicate how you typically eat in a day-to-day. So if you enjoy a biscuit here and there, have a biscuit here and there. And in the long run, it's going to be those biscuits, those crisps and those takeaways that actually help you lose weight. Now that's a really funny concept, and out of context that sounds ridiculous, but that's the truth because it's going to improve your sustainability of your calorie restriction. Now number 4 is high protein intake. And again, like I say in many videos, a high protein intake is important no matter your goal, whether you're trying to gain muscle, lose fat, or even maintain and just feel healthy. But for fat loss, it's a little bit of a different consideration. So not only when you're in that deficit is it going to help you maintain the muscle mass that you've worked hard to gain, but also it's higher in satiety. I think I've used that in the right way. Which basically means, in simple terms, it helps you get full up more. So the more protein you have, the easier it is for you to get full up. So when you're having a protein rich meal, you're going to feel a lot more full up opposed to meals which are very heavy in carbs and fats. Number 5 is training. Now this is one we are all guilty of either hearing or saying at some point. And I know I definitely did say it, and we probably all have been guilty of that. And it is saying the typical, I want to lose fat, I want to lose weight, I want to look more ripped, so I'm going to do high reps, low weight. No. The truth is, when you go to the gym, you do not burn anywhere near the calories that you may think you burn. The typical 180, 90 pound male, when they go for a gym session, burns anywhere between 200 to 300 calories. So you're never going to go into the gym and burn 700, 800, 900 calories in a weightlifting session. It just isn't realistic. And what I always say to people is give them a little bit more context is, say you take a single arm dumbbell curl and you have really lightweight and you do 20 reps of it. Think how sweaty, in the most simple terms, think how sweaty you're going to be after that exercise. Not at all. You're going to have exerted pretty much no energy whatsoever. Now let's look on the other hand and look at a heavy squat for 8 reps. Think how much energy you've exerted. So if you were ever going to burn more calories throughout a workout, it's going to be through a heavy compound session and not lightweight high reps. There's no actual way of toning a muscle. The truth, the simple, harsh truth to it is you either lower your body fat percentage through a calorie deficit, or you increase the amount of muscle mass you have, but you cannot tone a muscle. I'm sorry to break your heart. So people ask, how do I train when I'm in a calorie deficit? And the truth is, you don't actually have to change your approach whatsoever. Personally, when I'm cutting, I don't actually change my approach to my lifting whatsoever. I may become a little bit weaker, not too noticeable, but nothing really changes because the diet is your nutrition and your deficit is going to take care of that fat loss, not your weightlifting session. Number 6 is cardio. Now, how many times have we seen people doing countless amounts of cardio sessions, HIIT sessions, sprints, long runs, whatever it may be, because they are cutting or they are trying to lose fat? Is it necessary? Not really. Am I saying never do any form of cardio? Of course I'm not. If it makes you feel better, go for it. If it's going to help you achieve your goals, go for it. But is it a key component for fat loss? No. So the way I like to use cardio personally, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable when I'm trying to lose fat or go into a cut, is use it as a tool. For example, if I go out on the weekend or I have an extra big takeaway or I go out drinking maybe, and I've spilled over my calorie intake for the week, because I look at it as a whole, it's a little bit easier and a little bit more sustainable, then I use cardio as a tool to basically bring me back to where I need to be. So if I go a few hundred calories over, then yes, maybe I will do HIIT for 15-20 minutes to bring me back to where I need to be. But you don't have to be on that treadmill for countless hours to lose fat. So just use it as a tool if you don't like it to help you hit that deficit. Don't think that you have to be doing 1,000,001 hours of running to lose fat, because it's not the truth. So my final tip, number 7, is scales. Now this is such an important one amongst a lot of people that I speak to, and naturally whenever you think about losing weight, you imagine your body weight reducing. It's quite a normal way to sort of look at it. And now the reason that I brought this up is to basically say that using the scales, body scales that is, as a metric for your progress is not the best way of going about it. Can it be a good indicator? Yes. However, what I will stress is your body can fluctuate so much on a day-to-day, a week-to-week, even a large piss you're holding in can drastically change the amount you weigh. So we don't want to get overly upset if the scales aren't reflecting how we feel or reflecting the progress that we feel. Other indicators may just be simply how we look in the mirror. Do we look better to ourselves? How do we feel? Do we feel a bit more agile, a bit quicker? Do we even get a little bit less breathless when walking up the stairs? All things like this are very good indicators for how your diet or your deficit is going. The scales is not always going to be the best way to look at it. And I would urge that you try not to look at the scales as much as you can. If you are going to, I would typically say weigh yourself maybe once a week, no more than that, definitely no more than that, and do it in the morning after you've gone to the toilet, and this is typically going to give you the most accurate reading. And whenever you measure yourself, try and do it on the same day at the same time for maximum consistency. And another point off of that, of how you look, is obviously you don't have to go sending these to family and friends, but a really important one is to take progress photos. So there's a sort of a statistic that it takes 6 weeks for yourself to notice change on your body and 8 weeks for your friends and 12 weeks for other people. That just goes to show how much you see yourself on a day-to-day and you see your own reflection. You're not going to notice these very, very small changes. So it can be really important to take progress photos. So over time, you can look back and think, I actually made a lot of progress, when even you thought you hadn't really done a lot. So it's very important just for morale, and also of just keeping note of how you're doing. Because at the end of the day, the mirror test is honestly one of the best ways to measure your progress. When you're looking in the mirror and you're ultimately the person that's going to be doing this, how do you feel? If you feel 100 times better and your jeans feel a little bit looser, and you can walk the dog for 2 miles and feel a lot less breathless than you could 3 months ago, but the scales haven't changed dramatically, does that mean you haven't made progress? Absolutely not. And should you tell yourself you haven't made progress? Absolutely not. So the mirror test is actually one of the best ways I like to get people to measure their progress. So then my top 7 tips of how we can lose fat and do it sustainably and do it with relative enjoyment. So to recap, so number 1, we've got our calorie deficit and dropping our calories when our weight loss plateaus. Number 2 is tracking our food and using MyFitnessPal, but only using MyFitnessPal to track our amount of calories and our macronutrients. Number 3, and one of the most important, is enjoying the food that we're eating. Number 4 is our protein intake. Number 5 is how we train and making sure that we don't need to make any drastic changes or do the dreaded low weight, high reps. Number 6 is using cardio as a tool and not having to do hours of endless running. And number 7 is trying to neglect the scales as much as we possibly can. This is not Weight Watchers nor Slimming World. Other than that, that is the end of my video. As ever, if you ever have any questions, then feel free to drop a question in the comments, DM me on my Instagram, and don't forget to like and subscribe.